When Noah Gallagher collapsed on the cold marble floor, clutching his chest as his wife stormed out of their mansion after divorcing him and emptying their joint accounts to fund her lover's business, the world around him didn't just blur, it broke. The empire he built with love, trust, and sacrifice was gone in one signature. And the woman he once called his forever turned her back without a glance. She walked away with her 5 children, her new diamond ring glinting in the afternoon sun, while her lover, the very man Noah once mentored, waited smugly in the car outside. But as the paramedics lifted his limp body, a janitor, a young woman named Harper Quinn, watched in horror and did something no one else dared. She dialed a random number from his trembling phone, unaware she was setting in motion the most shocking chain of events that would change every life connected to that call. But who exactly was Harper Quinn, the janitor who became his lifeline? And what would happen weeks later that would leave his ex-wife and her lover shattered beyond repair? The night air inside the mansion still carried her perfume, expensive, sharp, and unforgettable. The faint echo of slammed doors and her final words, "You'll die poor, Noah," replayed in his head as the cold floor pressed against his cheek. He tried to breathe, but pain tore through his chest like fire. His vision dimmed, blurring the chandelier above into a halo of distorted light. He could still hear laughter from outside. His wife, Emily, laughing with her lover, Vincent. That sound was the last thing he heard before darkness took him. When Noah opened his eyes again, the world was dim and sterile. The rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors anchored him back to reality. His chest ached with every breath, a hollow reminder of what was left of his life. The doctor's words hit him harder than the heart attack itself. "You were lucky to survive, Mr. Gallagher, but your stress levels are dangerous. You need peace." Peace. What an absurd luxury for a man stripped of everything. He stared at the empty chair beside his bed. For 12 years, Emily had sat there through every flu, every deal gone wrong, every storm that rattled their home. But now there was no hand to hold, no soft voice to reassure him, only silence. The betrayal had been complete. She had filed the divorce, emptied every account, sold his car, even transferred ownership of their home to her new lover, all within 72 hours. His 5 children, brainwashed by her lies, refused his calls. The world saw him as a fool, a failed husband and broken man who couldn't hold his family together. But in the corner of the hospital room, a quiet pair of eyes watched him with concern. Harper Quinn. The janitor who had found him collapsed in the mansion lobby. She was 26, small frame but strong, her uniform still stained with the polish she used to scrub the marble floors. She didn't belong in that world of wealth and betrayal, yet fate had thrown her right into its darkest hour. She approached timidly, clutching a small food container. "You didn't eat all day," she said softly. Her voice carried no pity, just quiet kindness. "I thought you might need this." Noah looked at her, really looked. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional way, but there was something unshakably honest in her eyes. He forced a weak smile. "You shouldn't be here. They'll fire you if they see you talking to me." She shrugged. "Let them. You needed someone." Her words pierced something inside him that medicine couldn't reach. She didn't know who he was or what he had lost, yet she had been the only one to act when everyone else stood by, watching him collapse like a fallen tree in a storm. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the hospital corridors emptied, Harper sat beside his bed, scrolling through his phone. The screen was cracked from the fall, and a number blinked on the dial history, the random number she had called when she found him gasping. "I didn't know who to call," she murmured. "I just pressed one." Noah frowned faintly. "And who picked up?" "A man named, Mr. Calloway," she said, glancing up. "He said he knew you." Noah's heartbeat quickened. Richard Calloway, his late father's attorney, a man he hadn't spoken to in years. "Did he say anything else?" Harper hesitated. "He said, he's been waiting for your call for years, that it's time." Noah's eyes flickered with confusion, then dread, then a glimmer of something else. Hope. "Time for what?" he asked. But Harper didn't have the answer. Over the next few days, she visited him daily. She brought food, books, and warmth into the sterile space his life had become. For the first time since the divorce, Noah felt seen, not as a ruined man or failed husband, but as someone worth saving. Harper never asked about his past. She simply cared for him like his life mattered. But one evening, when the rain battered against the hospital window and thunder shook the glass, his phone rang again. It was Richard Calloway. "Noah!" The old man's voice came through, calm but firm. "You need to come to my office tomorrow. Your father's estate. It's matured. You're the sole heir." Noah froze. He had forgotten about it. The sealed inheritance his late father left under strict conditions. He wasn't supposed to access it until he turned 40, and that birthday had passed just 2 months ago. "How much are we talking about?" Noah whispered. There was a pause on the line. Then Calloway's voice, deliberate and heavy. $10.89 billion. Noah dropped the phone, his breath catching. For a moment he couldn't speak. Harper looked at him, puzzled. "What's wrong?" He turned to her slowly, eyes trembling with disbelief and quiet rage. "Everything's about to change." Outside, lightning split the sky, flashing across the city skyline like an omen. In that brief burst of light, Noah's reflection in the hospital window didn't look broken anymore. It looked reborn, colder, sharper, and ready for something dark. The morning after the call from Richard Calloway felt strangely quiet. Noah stood by the hospital window, staring at the faint glow of dawn breaking through the rain-soaked skyline. For the first time in weeks, his heartbeat was steady, not because he was calm, but because purpose had replaced pain. The betrayal that had almost killed him now burned into fuel. Harper Quinn arrived early, as she always did, carrying a cup of hot coffee and a small smile that didn't belong in his world of chaos. She placed it on the bedside table, unaware she was standing next to a man who had just inherited $10.89 billion. He turned from the window, watching her move quietly around the room. Her steps were light but purposeful. "You shouldn't keep doing this," he said, his tone softer than he intended. "You've done enough." Harper looked at him, brow slightly furrowed. "If I stop showing up, who'd remind you to live?" she asked. Her honesty disarmed him. He didn't have an answer, just a silence that stretched long enough to mean something. Later that day, a black Bentley arrived at the hospital entrance. The sight of it felt surreal. His name no longer belonged to poverty, but power. Calloway himself stepped out, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, carrying a folder thick with documents. "You look like hell, Noah," he said, but there was something like pride beneath the sarcasm. "But you survived. That's all that matters." In the hospital's quiet private lounge, Calloway spread the papers across the table. "Your father anticipated this," he said. "He said the fortune shouldn't go to a man who has everything, but to one who's lost everything and survived." Noah stared at the figures written in black ink. The trust funds, the offshore holdings, the corporations quietly generating wealth across continents. It was almost too much to grasp. $10.89 billion. Not inherited wealth anymore. Power, redemption, revenge. His pulse quickened, but his expression stayed calm. "She took everything," he murmured, "but she'll never see this coming." Calloway adjusted his glasses. "Be smart with this, Noah. Don't waste it proving something to ghosts." But Noah only smiled faintly, eyes distant. "Oh, I'm not proving anything," he said. "I'm rebuilding everything she burned, and I'll make her and that man beg to stand on the ashes." That evening, Harper found him sitting quietly on the hospital bed, a strange calm around him. "You're leaving tomorrow?" she asked, noticing the pack bag by his side. "Yes," he replied. "There's something I have to do." She hesitated before stepping closer. "You found something out, didn't you?" He looked up at her then, and for the first time she saw not the wounded man she'd rescued, but someone infinitely more dangerous. "I found myself," he said simply, "and the means to finish what others started." That night he left the hospital. Harper stood by the window, watching his silhouette disappear into the dark rain. She didn't understand everything, but she knew his pain had changed. It had direction now. Within a week, whispers began across the city. Anonymous investors began quietly buying out Vincent's business shares. Contracts fell apart overnight. Deals vanished. Suppliers withdrew. The empire Emily had financed with stolen money began to crumble. She screamed at Vincent in their glass-walled office, her voice echoing over the city skyline. "You said it was secure! You said no one could touch it!" Vincent slammed his hand on the desk. "Someone's bleeding us from the inside," he shouted. But he didn't know it was Noah. He didn't know that every account they opened, every deal they sealed, had already been traced and quietly destroyed. Noah watched it all unfold from a penthouse far above them, his new world of wealth, a quiet, vengeful machine. He didn't boast. He didn't gloat. He simply watched the numbers fall. For every dollar they had stolen, he took 10 back. For every lie they told, he bought the truth and made it public. He was no longer a victim. He was an architect of ruin. And yet, amid all that vengeance, his mind kept returning to Harper, the janitor who had dialed that random number, the one who had looked at him like he still mattered when no one else did. He hadn't seen her since leaving the hospital, but he thought of her every night. Her voice echoed whenever he felt the temptation to go too far. "You needed someone," she had said. Maybe he still did. A month later, Emily's new life shattered completely. Vincent's company went bankrupt, their assets seized, their home repossessed. The tabloids ran headlines mocking their fall, from power couple to paupers. Emily found herself standing outside their foreclosed mansion in the same rain where Noah once collapsed. Her makeup streaked, her designer coat drenched. Vincent screamed at her, blaming her for everything, while she blamed him in return. And somewhere across the city, Noah watched the footage replay on his tablet, his expression unreadable. He wasn't finished yet. That night, a delivery truck arrived at Emily's rented apartment. The driver handed her a letter embossed with gold initials, NG. Inside, a single line read, "Debt settled, interest paid. You'll see me soon." Emily froze, her hands trembling. For the first time, she felt true fear. She had destroyed Noah Gallagher, but now he was back, and she had no idea just how far he would go to end what she started. Emily stood at the window of the small apartment she once mocked others for living in, the city's nightlights flickering against her hollow reflection. Her hand trembled as she reread Noah's letter for the 10th time. Debt settled, interest paid. You'll see me soon. The golden initials shimmered beneath the lamp, elegant and cruel, the same initials once engraved on her wedding band. Vincent paced the living room behind her, shouting into his phone at brokers who no longer answered. The empire she had abandoned her family for was crumbling faster than she could process. Banks froze their accounts, investors withdrew, and a quiet, invisible hand kept pulling every string that once secured their comfort. "It's him," Vincent said finally, slamming his phone onto the table. "It's your ex-husband. Who else would have the power to do this?" Emily turned slowly, her eyes wide, hollow. "He has nothing left," she whispered. "He had a heart attack. I saw him fall. He couldn't even pay his hospital bills." Vincent scoffed. "Then explain this. Every one of our investors was bought out by an anonymous fund. Every contract rerouted to a new parent company. Gallagher Holdings." The name hung in the air like a ghost. Emily's throat tightened. "That name? That's his father's old company." Vincent grabbed a drink from the counter, his hands shaking. "Whoever revived it just took over everything. They even bought the penthouse lease in your old building." Emily sank onto the couch, the walls closing in. The irony cut deep. She had traded loyalty for luxury, and now both were gone. "What if he's still alive?" she whispered. "What if he knows?" Across town, Noah sat in the penthouse that once belonged to another tycoon, overlooking the same skyline where he had once been humiliated. The glass walls reflected his quiet intensity. He wasn't the man who'd collapsed on a marble floor. He was reborn, sharpened by betrayal and wealth. Behind him, the soft hum of the city mixed with the sound of quiet footsteps. Harper Quinn's. She had found him again 3 weeks earlier, through a news clip about his business comeback. She had arrived at his office unannounced, holding a small bag of pastries and her old nervous smile. "I just wanted to see if you're okay," she said then. Unaware, she had walked into the headquarters of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Now she stood behind him as he watched Emily's financial empire collapse on the screens before him. "You're destroying them," she said quietly. He didn't look away. They destroyed me first. Harper hesitated. But does revenge fix it? Noah's jaw tightened. Revenge doesn't fix it. It balances it. She stepped closer, her reflection beside his in the glass. Sometimes balance comes when you let go. He turned to her, his voice calm but cold. Let go? She took my children. She told them I was worthless. She left me for the man I trained. She emptied everything I had and laughed as I collapsed. Do you think I can just forgive that? Harper's eyes softened. No. But I think the man who built an empire out of nothing doesn't need to crawl through ashes to prove he's standing. Her words stayed with him long after she left the room. He couldn't sleep. Every light in the penthouse stayed on, as if darkness itself carried her voice. That night, he walked into his private study, opened a drawer and stared at an old photo. Emily holding their first child, smiling like she had meant it. He remembered the early days, before money, before lies. He remembered selling his first car to buy her engagement ring, the one she later pawned to fund her lover's business. The pain returned, not as weakness, but as clarity. By dawn, he made a decision. If revenge was the only language Emily understood, then he would speak it fluently, but on his own terms. That same morning, Emily received a court summons. She was being sued for fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of marital funds. The plaintiff's name, Gallagher Financial Group. Her jaw dropped. He's suing me, she shouted. Vincent grabbed the papers from her hand, scanning them quickly. This isn't just a lawsuit. This is a trap. If he wins, we lose everything permanently. She snapped, We already have. Her voice cracked under the weight of her own choices. For the first time, fear settled where arrogance once lived. 3 days later, Emily stood outside the courthouse in the same city where she had once paraded her new life. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust into her face. Mrs. Gallagher, is it true your ex-husband is suing you for financial theft? Did you really drain his accounts to fund your lover's company? Her face flushed red beneath the flash of cameras. Inside the courtroom, Noah sat calmly, impeccably dressed, every inch the powerful man she had once begged to be near. Harper sat quietly behind him, dressed simply, her hands folded. Emily's steps faltered when she saw her, the janitor who had once mopped her floors now sitting beside the man she betrayed. The proceedings began. Noah said little, letting his attorneys handle the verbal warfare. But every word, every document, every revelation hit Emily like a blade. Her lover's company had been traced to multiple fraudulent accounts. Funds she had transferred illegally were now frozen. The judge's expression hardened as the evidence stacked higher. Emily's attorney leaned in. If this continues, you'll lose everything. Settle. She looked at Noah, her pride dissolving into panic. For a second, she tried to find mercy in his eyes, but all she found was silence, the same silence she had left him in. By the end of the day, the ruling was clear. Noah won. She owed him everything she stole, plus interest. The courtroom erupted with murmurs as Emily stood frozen. Her hands shook. Her voice was a whisper. Noah, please, I didn't mean... But he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked past her without a word. Harper rose and followed him. As they exited, Emily collapsed into her seat, sobbing. Not for love lost, but for power gone. Outside, as the cameras flashed again, Harper turned to Noah. Is it over now? He looked at the sky for a long moment before answering. No, this was just justice. Revenge comes next. The city shimmered under twilight as Noah's convoy of black SUVs wound through the streets toward the grand ballroom of the Kingsley Towers, a towering monument of glass and wealth. The same building where, 1 year ago, Emily had hosted their anniversary party and publicly humiliated him before filing for divorce the next morning. Tonight, the same venue glittered with gold lights again, but this time the event belonged to Gallagher Holdings. The irony was poetic. Every guest, every investor, every socialite in attendance owed their presence to the man Emily once called a failure. Inside the ballroom, champagne sparkled and violins played softly over the hum of expensive laughter. Harper stood at the edge of the room in a navy gown Noah had insisted she wear. She felt out of place among the billionaires and CEOs. But Noah's quiet nod across the room made her stay. He wore a tailored black tuxedo, calm and unhurried, greeting senators and financiers like a man who'd been born to it. Yet beneath that poise, his eyes never stopped searching for one face. Emily arrived late, dressed in desperate elegance, her once flawless confidence cracked beneath forced smiles. Vincent trailed beside her, thinner now, his suit wrinkled, his charm gone. They had accepted Noah's invitation without realizing who the host truly was. When the usher announced Mr. and Mrs. Vincent Hayes, Noah turned slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time since the courthouse. The air thickened. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the music seemed to hush as their gazes locked, hers trembling, his unflinching. Emily swallowed hard. "Noah," she managed, voice barely a whisper. He smiled faintly, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Emily," he said simply, offering his hand as though greeting a stranger. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm, steady, merciless. Vincent tried to recover the moment. "Gallagher," he said, forcing a grin. "Quite the event. You've built quite the empire in a short time." Noah's reply was calm but cutting. "Funny, you said the same thing when I helped you start yours." The words landed like a slap. Vincent's smile faltered. Emily looked away, her pulse quickening. Noah excused himself smoothly, but his presence lingered like a storm waiting to break. As the evening progressed, Noah took the stage. Cameras flashed as he stood before the massive Gallagher Holdings emblem projected behind him. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady, "we celebrate not just growth, but restoration. Sometimes life takes everything from us so we can remember who we were meant to become." He paused, scanning the crowd. His eyes found Emily again. "And sometimes we must lose everything to learn the value of loyalty." A ripple moved through the audience. Emily froze. Everyone knew his story. The tabloids had made sure of it. But hearing him say those words, looking straight at her, was a public execution masked as a speech. Harper, standing near the back, felt the tension hum in her chest. She had seen Noah rebuild himself piece by piece, but this moment was different. This wasn't healing. This was vengeance dressed in velvet. After the applause, the event flowed into whispers. Emily couldn't take it anymore. She followed him into the corridor behind the ballroom, where chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, the same cold surface where he once collapsed. "Noah," she called softly. He stopped but didn't turn. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice cracked. "I was stupid. I thought Vincent said you'd ruin me. I thought he was strong. I was wrong." Noah turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "You thought he was rich," he corrected. "You thought I was finished. And now you're here because you've lost everything you traded me for." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, I just want peace. For the kids. The kids." His voice hardened. "The ones you told belonged to him?" She flinched. He stepped closer, eyes cold but steady. "You told them their father was a failure, that I was weak, that I deserved nothing. You wanted me erased." Her lips trembled. "I was angry. No," he interrupted quietly. "You were greedy." He stepped past her. "Peace, Emily. You don't get peace. Not yet." When he left, Emily pressed her back to the wall, shaking. She had faced judges, reporters, and ruin, but nothing compared to standing before the man she betrayed and realizing he no longer hated her. He had outgrown her. Later that night, Harper found Noah alone on the balcony, watching the city glitter beneath him. "You got what you wanted," she said softly. He exhaled, the wind catching his breath. "Did I?" "You humbled them," she continued. "You showed everyone who you really are. Isn't that enough?" He looked at her for a long moment, then back at the skyline. "I thought revenge would feel like justice," he murmured. "But it feels empty." She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Maybe because you're still standing in the ruins, waiting for something to burn?" He turned toward her, and for the first time in months, the anger in his eyes softened. "You saved my life," he said quietly, "and I've spent every day since then trying to prove I don't need saving." Harper smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time you live again, Noah. not just survive. Their silence lingered like a promise. Behind them, the ballroom lights dimmed, the guests departed, and somewhere across the city, Emily wept alone in a dark apartment, while Noah finally began to understand that the most brutal revenge might be the one where he simply moved on. Rain poured heavily over the city that night, drumming against the windows of Noah's penthouse as if echoing the storm inside his chest. The gala had ended hours ago, but his mind hadn't found rest. He stood in front of the wide glass wall, a tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand, the lights of skyscrapers stretching endlessly below him. In the reflection, he saw not the billionaire he had become, but the man who once collapsed on a cold floor, betrayed and discarded. Behind him, Harper moved quietly, her soft steps barely breaking the silence. She'd stayed after everyone left, sensing what he didn't say aloud. "You're still watching the rain," she said gently, placing a folded blanket on the couch. "You've been standing there for an hour." He turned slightly. "It reminds me of that night," he murmured, "the night everything ended and began." Harper came closer, her eyes calm and knowing. "You rebuilt your world from ashes, Noah. You don't have to live in that night anymore." He set the glass down, staring at her. "She's not done," he said quietly. "Emily, she went to court again. She's trying to take what's left." Harper's face tightened. What more could she want? "My name, my reputation. If she can't have my money, she'll try to stain everything I've built." He ran a hand through his hair. "And she's not working alone. Vincent's pulling strings behind the scenes. They filed a new lawsuit, claiming I used stolen funds to rebuild Gallagher Holdings." Harper frowned. "That's ridiculous." "True," Noah said, "but perception is power, and they know that." She looked at him for a long moment. "So what are you going to do?" He turned away, his jaw tightening. "Finish it." The next morning, Noah arrived at court. Cameras lined the steps. The media had turned the trial into a spectacle, a public war between the betrayed and the betrayers. Emily arrived wearing a pale beige dress, her expression deliberately fragile. Vincent walked beside her, whispering into her ear, playing the role of the devoted partner. But beneath the surface, their alliance was crumbling. They had lost their fortune, their influence, their reputation. Now they were fighting for relevance. Inside the courtroom, Noah sat silently beside his attorney, while Harper watched from the back row. The air was thick with tension as Emily's lawyer rose to speak. "Your Honor," he began, "my client seeks fair restitution for assets unlawfully withheld by Mr. Gallagher following their divorce, funds that rightfully belong to her as joint marital property." Noah's attorney stood calmly. "Your Honor, every dollar my client possesses was inherited from his late father's trust, activated after the dissolution of marriage. There are no stolen funds, only stolen years." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Emily's composure faltered for the first time. Noah met her gaze, his eyes steady, unreadable. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Hayes, is it true you withdrew the entirety of the marital savings days before your husband's hospitalization?" Emily swallowed. It was a misunderstanding. Did you use those funds to invest in your lover's company?" Her silence was answer enough. The judge sighed. "This court doesn't reward deceit, Mrs. Hayes." As the ruling leaned inevitably toward Noah, Emily's desperation cracked through her mask. "You're not even human anymore," she hissed, rising suddenly. "You think all this money makes you better than us? You think this makes you a god?" Noah didn't flinch. "No, Emily," he said quietly. "Money doesn't make anyone better, but it exposes who people really are." Security guided her back to her seat as the courtroom erupted in whispers. Vincent avoided her eyes completely. When the gavel finally struck, the verdict was decisive. Noah won again. The case was dismissed with prejudice, and Emily was ordered to pay damages. The reporters outside flooded him with questions, but Noah ignored them. He walked past the cameras with Harper by his side, her quiet presence steadying him. Later that evening, they drove through the rain to a small diner, the kind of place Noah hadn't visited in years. The neon lights buzzed softly above the windows. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried food filled the air. It was simple, unpretentious, Real. Harper smiled when she saw him hesitate at the door. You can take off the armor here, she said. They sat in a corner booth. Noah removed his jacket, unbuttoned his cuffs, and for the first time in months, exhaled without tension. Do you ever miss your old life? Harper asked softly. He stirred his coffee. Sometimes, but I think what I miss more is who I was before I started chasing people who never deserved me. She smiled faintly. Then maybe this is your chance to start again. Her words settled in his chest. He looked at her, really looked, and realized something had changed. She wasn't just the woman who saved him anymore. She had become the calm in his chaos, the voice that steadied his revenge before it consumed him. The moment was interrupted when a man walked into the diner, soaked, frantic, eyes wild. Vincent. He spotted Noah instantly and rushed over. You ruined me, he shouted, slamming his fists on the table. You destroyed everything. Noah didn't move. No, he said evenly. You destroyed yourself. I just watched. Vincent's anger broke into trembling frustration. Please, Noah. You don't understand. The investors are gone. The debts are crushing us. I'll do anything. Just call them off. Harper's hand brushed Noah's under the table. Let him go, she whispered. Noah stood slowly, towering over the broken man who had stolen his family. You wanted my life, Vincent. Now you have it, empty and alone. He dropped a folded check on the table. Take it, pay your debts, then disappear. Vincent stared at the check, speechless. Why? Because you're not worth hating anymore, Noah said quietly, and walked out into the rain. Outside, Harper followed him, her umbrella barely shielding them. You could have let him drown, she said softly. He looked at her, rain sliding down his face like absolution. Maybe forgiveness is the final revenge. That night, as they drove back through the storm, Harper rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time since his collapse, Noah didn't feel hollow. The city lights blurred into gold streaks through the rain, and somewhere deep inside, the man who had once fallen was finally learning to stand without anger. The morning sun rose soft and golden over the Gallagher estate, spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the glass mansion that overlooked the ocean. Months had passed since the courtroom war, since the night Noah walked away from revenge and chose something quieter. Peace. The once restless energy that filled his days had softened. Even the air in the house felt new. In the garden below, laughter floated upward like music. 3 small voices, giggling over nothing and everything all at once. Harper's voice followed, patient, warm, the kind of sound that could pull a man back to life. Noah stood on the balcony, barefoot in a white shirt, a mug of coffee in his hand. From where he stood, he could see his children, triplets, just over a year old, playing on the grass, Harper kneeling beside them, her sundress brushing the daisies. The sight hit him with a tenderness he hadn't known he was capable of feeling again. He remembered the man who had once collapsed on a cold floor, destroyed and alone, and for a brief, humbling moment, he was grateful that life had forced him to start over. Harper looked up and caught him watching. She waved, her smile bright as morning. He smiled back, the kind of smile that didn't need words. The children, Noah Jr., Grace, and Callan, turned at their mother's gesture, their tiny hands reaching for him. He walked down to them, each step grounding him deeper into a world he'd never expected to have again. Harper brushed a lock of hair from her face as he approached. You're supposed to be resting, she teased. I've had enough rest for a lifetime, he said, bending to lift one of the children into his arms. I don't want to miss a second of this. She laughed. You sound like a man who finally knows what he wants. I do, he replied simply, and it's right here. Later that afternoon, they sat together on the patio overlooking the water. Harper poured lemonade while the children napped in the shade. The sea breeze tangled her hair, sunlight glinting off her wedding ring, his mother's ring, the only thing from his past he'd kept. You never told me what happened to her, she said softly, tracing the rim of her glass. He looked toward the horizon. Emily? Harper nodded. He hesitated before answering. After the last trial, she disappeared for a while. Then I heard she'd left Vincent. He's in prison for fraud now. She moved out of the city, somewhere quiet, I'm told. I could have crushed her completely, Harper, but What's the point? She has to live with herself. That's punishment enough. Harper studied him for a moment. You really let go. He nodded slowly. You taught me how. She smiled, resting her hand over his. Noah Gallagher, the man who thought forgiveness was weakness. He chuckled quietly. Don't remind me. As the day melted into evening, they walked along the shoreline, the sand cool beneath their feet. The twins toddled ahead, squealing each time the tide kissed their toes. Harper's laughter mingled with theirs, and for once, Noah allowed himself to feel completely human again, unburdened, alive, at peace. But even peace carries ghosts. A letter arrived a week later, unmarked, handwritten in elegant script. Harper found it on the front porch and handed it to him after dinner. You want me to open it? He shook his head and tore the envelope carefully. Inside was a single page. No address, no date. Just words written in familiar cursive. Noah, you don't have to forgive me, and I know you never will. I just needed you to know that the children ask about you sometimes. I told them the truth this time, that their father is a good man, stronger than I ever was. I'm sorry for everything I took from you. I hope you found the happiness I never gave. Emily Noah's hand stilled. He read the note twice, then folded it neatly and set it on the table. Harper said nothing. She simply reached across, took his hand, and squeezed. Are you okay? She asked quietly. He looked at her, then at their children sleeping in the living room, and nodded. Yes, he said. For the first time in my life, I really am. That night, after putting the children to bed, they stood outside together under the stars. The ocean stretched into darkness, calm and endless. Harper leaned into his shoulder. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been there that day? He smiled faintly. I think I was meant to collapse, he said, because that's the only way I'd have found you. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. You don't owe me anything, Noah. He shook his head. I owe you everything. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the waves. Then Noah spoke again, softly, almost to himself. Funny, isn't it? She divorced me to chase wealth and ended up poor. You were cleaning floors and ended up my home. Harper laughed under her breath. Life has a sense of humor. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. No, he said, life has balance. The wind lifted her hair as she whispered, and what happens now? He turned her face toward his. Now, he said, we live. When dawn broke the next morning, the house filled with the sounds of tiny feet and laughter again. Noah sat at the dining table, feeding one of the babies while Harper hummed in the kitchen. The television played softly in the background, another news report about the continued fall of Vincent Hayes and his failed empire. But Noah barely glanced at it. His world wasn't made of numbers anymore. It was built of small, unspoken moments, the warmth of Harper's hand, the quiet peace of his children's laughter, and the realization that victory wasn't in destroying his enemies, but in outliving their hatred. Outside, the ocean shimmered beneath the sunlight, endless and forgiving. Noah looked out the window and smiled, whispering to himself, the man who fell finally learned to rise. And as Harper joined him, their children laughing between them, the echoes of his past faded completely, leaving only life, love, and the quiet triumph of a man who turned heartbreak into legacy. Dear viewers, life has a strange way of teaching us that pain isn't always the end. It's often the beginning of something greater. Noah lost everything, his wealth, his marriage, his dignity. But when the world turned its back on him, he rose from the ashes not through hate, but through healing. His revenge wasn't destroying others. It was rebuilding himself. No matter how deeply someone betrays you, remember this. The greatest victory is not revenge that burns others, but peace that heals you. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you untouchable. But let's hear from you. What do you think hurts more? Being betrayed by someone you loved, or realizing they were never who you thought they were? And if you were in Noah's place, would you forgive like he did, or would you go for revenge? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters, and your story might inspire someone else watching right now.